The distress beacon had burned across 40 light-years before anyone answered it with anything less than a warship. The humans answered it with one ship. Not a fleet, not a squadron, one ship. It dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Concordat. Assembly point without ceremony. No escort, no fanfare, it simply appeared. A vessel of modest size against the massive backdrop of 42 alien warships, holding formation, and announced itself on the open channel. ISV Resolute, arriving as requested. Please transmit docking coordinates. That was it, no speeches, no posturing. In the Great Council chamber aboard the Concordat flagship, the reaction was immediate. 42 species talking at once is not a sound that translates well to any single language. It is closer to an event than a noise. Ambassador Ron of the Torathi stood at his station, silver-skinned and still, watching the single human vessel hold its position on the display screen. He let the chaos run for a moment before he pressed 2 fingers to the broadcast panel. Silence, please. It took longer than it should have. It always did. Admiral Breck of the Gorvathi did not bother with silence. He simply spoke, louder than everyone else. One ship, he said, and laughed a deep grinding sound that his translator rendered poorly. The humans sent us one ship. We asked for a military response, and they sent us a survey vessel. Several other voices agreed. Ron did not agree or disagree. He was still looking at the Resolute on the display. It was not moving. Ships arriving at an assembly point always moved, adjusting trim, running sensor sweeps, signaling alliance affiliation in the dozen small ways that spacefaring species had developed over centuries. The Resolute did none of these things. It sat where it had arrived as if it had chosen that exact position deliberately and saw no reason to change it. Ron had been a diplomat for over 200 years. He had learned to pay attention to the things that did not match his expectations. This ship did not match his expectations. I will speak with their commander, he said. Breck laughed again. Send them home while you're at it. We have no use for a scouting vessel in a war zone. Ron did not respond to that. He was already walking. The docking transfer took 20 minutes. Ron used the time to review what he knew about humanity, which was less than he was comfortable admitting. They had joined the Concordat 14 years ago. They had brought technology that interested the SETI engineers greatly. They had been quiet members mostly. Observant, they had not yet fought in any Concordat engagement. The Vreth had destroyed 3 frontier colony worlds in 6 weeks. The death count was already in the hundreds of thousands. The Concordat War Council had sent emergency requests to every member species with military capacity. The humans had responded in 4 days with 1 ship. He stepped through the docking collar and into the Resolute. The commander was waiting. She was not standing at attention, she was leaning against the corridor wall with her arms folded, the way someone waits for a friend who is slightly late. She was shorter than Ron expected, with dark skin and close-cut hair, and she looked at him with eyes that were entirely calm. Ambassador, she said, I'm Dara Osai, welcome aboard. Commander, he looked past her down the corridor. The ship was clean and quiet. He could hear faintly someone somewhere whistling. I will be direct. The Concordat Council expected a fleet. The Vreth have destroyed 3 worlds. We have casualties in the hundreds of thousands, and a 4th colony in there. Projected path. 1 vessel, even a fine one, is not what was asked for. Osei nodded. I know what was asked for. Then you understand our concern. I understand it, she said. I don't share it. She pushed off the wall and gestured down the corridor. Come have something to eat. You've had a long trip. Ron stood still for a moment. In 200 years of diplomacy he had been Dismissed, flattered, deceived, and threatened, he had not often been offered a meal as a response to a military crisis. He followed her. The small mess at the end of the corridor had 4 crew members in it, all of whom glanced up when Ron entered, nodded with casual curiosity, and went back to what they were doing. A young woman with a data tablet did not look up at all. An older man with grease still on his hands was eating something that smelled complex and good. Osai poured Ron something warm and dark and placed it in front of him, without asking if he wanted it. "Your council," she said, sitting across from him, "counted the ships. That's a reasonable thing to count." She wrapped both hands around her own cup. "But when Earth looked at the Vreth attack pattern, we didn't count ships. We counted something else." Ron looked at her. "What did you count?" She looked back at him with those calm eyes, and for the first time he felt something he had not expected to feel in this conversation, something quiet and cold moved through him, not fear exactly, more like the particular feeling of standing at the edge of a very deep place and only just noticing. She smiled, and it was not unkind. "Finish your drink," she said. "We'll get to that." In his flagship council chamber, Ron knew Breck was still laughing. Elder Yova of the Concordat was not, the oldest living member of the council, sat at her station with her 4 eyes fixed on the display where the Resolute held its position, still, precise, and utterly unhurried. She had not laughed once. Ron had expected to be managed. That was the word he kept returning to as the first day aboard the Resolute unfolded. Managed, given a comfortable room, briefed on acceptable topics, steered away from anything sensitive. Every species did it with outside observers. It was basic diplomatic protocol. Osai did not manage him. She handed him a ship-wide access card at breakfast and told him 2 things were off-limits: the lower engineering annex and the sealed navigation core. Everything else, she said, he was welcome to see. He almost asked why those 2 were off-limits. Then he decided it was more interesting to see what the rest revealed first. What it revealed over the following hours was a crew that behaved in ways he could not quite categorize. They were not formal, they laughed, they argued quietly over minor things. They left half-eaten meals on consoles in a way that would have caused a Torathi officer to formally reprimand 3 people. But when something demanded attention, the change was instant, not urgent. Instant, there was no ramp-up, no adjustment period. The moment a system alert fired on the bridge, every relevant person was already moving before the second tone sounded. Ron had served aboard Concordat vessels for decades as a diplomatic observer. He had never seen response times like that. He mentioned this to SETI engineer Fiss, who had been assigned to accompany him as a secondary observer from the council. Fiss was small even by SETI standards, and she communicated primarily through the rapid clicking of her secondary mandibles when she was thinking hard. She clicked a great deal now. "I noticed the same," Fiss said quietly. "I asked one of the crew, Navigator Solis, I asked how they train response time to that standard." She clicked again. "She said they don't train it specifically," she said. "It comes from knowing the ship well enough that anything wrong feels wrong before the sensors say so." Ron considered that. That's intuition, not training. In their framework, apparently, those are the same thing. He thought about that for a long time. In the afternoon, Pieter, the chief engineer, a wide-shouldered man who seemed to have been built for smaller spaces and had simply refused to be stopped by, that offered Fiss an informal tour of the main engine room, not the sealed annex, the standard engineering deck. Ron went along. He was not an engineer, but he had learned that watching the SETI observe something technically complex was frequently more informative than the thing itself. This lasted approximately 4 minutes before she started clicking so fast. Her translator could not keep up. She crouched beside an energy manifold and pointed with 2 of her 6 limbs at something Ron could not parse at all. Peter watched her with visible pleasure, the way someone watches a person correctly identify a magic trick. "You see it," Peter said. "This configuration should cause cascade failure in any sustained high output scenario," Fiss said. "Standard concordat models show a 17% failure probability above 0.8 thrust. Standard concordat models use standard concordat materials," Peter said. He tapped the manifold casing lightly with one knuckle. "We don't." Fiss looked up at him. "What do you use?" Peter smiled. It was a very comfortable smile, the smile of a man who was happy in his work. "Something we worked out about 30 years ago. Took a long time to get it right." He patted the manifold again, gently, the way one might pat something alive. "She holds." Fiss transmitted 11 separate queries to the Concordat Engineering archive that evening. None of them found a match for what she had seen. On the bridge, Solis had been running numbers since before they had docked. She was young even by human standards, which Ron was still learning to calibrate. She had the particular stillness of people who are doing complex things in their heads while appearing to be doing nothing at all. Her display showed the Vreth attack pattern, 3 colony worlds mapped in red with projected vectors and timing intervals spreading outward like the fingers of something reaching. Ron stood beside her station and looked at it for a long time. "They are not moving randomly," he said. "No," Solis said. She did not seem surprised that he saw it. "They're hurting. Every attack angle pushes refugee and emergency traffic in a specific direction. They're moving something out of the way." "Out of the way of what?" She pointed to a region of space on the far edge of the display. "No red marks. There are no attacks. A perfect, untouched corridor through the frontier. Something bigger is coming through that gap," she said. "These 3 attacks. Are the gates opening?" Ron felt that cold, deep feeling again, the edge of something vast, very close. "You told Commander Osai this before we left Earth," Solis said. He stared at her. "You knew before you left." She nodded and pulled up a second layer on the display, a projection Ron had not seen before, showing not just the current attacks but the logical endpoint of the herding pattern. It converged on a single point, the Concordat's largest remaining frontier station, the one currently hosting over 600,000 civilian refugees from the destroyed colonies. "So the question," Solis said quietly, "was never how many ships to send. It was what kind." Ron returned to Osai's office that evening. He stood in the doorway and looked at the human commander sitting at her desk, reading something on a plain screen. "What is this ship actually built to do?" he asked. She looked up, the same calm, the same eyes that gave nothing away and somehow gave everything away at the same time. "Whatever needs doing," she said. He stood there a moment longer. Then he went to his quarters and did not sleep for a very long time. The Vreth arrived early. Not by chance. Solis had already explained that the timing shift was itself part of the strategy. When prey was aware and consolidating, the Vreth accelerated. They did not give things time to harden. 3 Concordat warships moved to intercept. The Resolute held position. Ron watched from the observation deck, a long transparent strip running along the Resolute's port side. He had been standing there for an hour, watching the Concordat vessels form their defensive line. They were large, well-armed ships, the best the Gorvathi fleet had assigned to this sector. Admiral Breck's voice came across the open channel, addressing the Resolute. "Stay back," he said. "You will only be in the way." Osai's response came from the bridge, calm as always. Understood, wheel. Hold here. Fist clicked quietly at Ron's elbow. The SETI engineer had taken two, following him through the ship, possibly because she found Ron's confusion useful as a baseline for her own observations. She agreed very easily, Fist said. Yes, Ron said. Humans don't usually agree that easily. No, Ron said, they don't. The Vreth dropped out of their transit drive, 11,000 kilometers from the Concordat line. There were 9 of them, each roughly the size of a Gorvathi heavy cruiser, their hulls dark and irregular, built in the biological machine hybrid style that Vreth engineering favored. They moved in a loose, shifting pattern that the Concordat tactical database classified as a pack spread formation. The first exchange lasted 4 minutes. The Concordat ships performed well. Coordinated, disciplined, holding their range. The Vreth pack spread was designed to confuse range-based weapons by ensuring that targeting any single ship opened a firing angle for another. It was effective. The lead Concordat warship took 2 direct strikes and went dark on propulsion. The second warship pulled to cover it. The third, Breck's command vessel, held the line alone, absorbing punishment in exchange for making the Vreth pay for every meter of advance. The first warship began to drift. It was heavily damaged, and 2 of the Vreth ships were turning toward it. The Resolute moved. Ron had expected to see it move toward the edges of the fight, a flanking maneuver, something cautious. Instead, it accelerated directly at the 2 Vreth ships converging on the damaged Concordat vessel, directly at them, at a speed that made Fist click so rapidly she had to cover her own translator with one limb to stop it from producing noise. The bridge channel was open. Ron could hear it. Pieter was talking not to the crew but to the ship itself, a constant low murmur of reassurance and instruction, the way one talks to something that can hear you but cannot answer. Solis was running calculations aloud, strings of numbers and coordinates that overlapped each other. Osai said almost nothing. She gave 2 orders in the whole engagement, and both were single words. The Resolute did not fight the way Concordat vessels fought. Concordat doctrine was built around maintaining range, preserving hull integrity, and trading damage at favorable ratios. What the Resolute did had no clean name in Concordat tactical language. It closed with the Vreth ships. It moved through their fire, not by being faster than the shots, by being somewhere other than where the shots expected it to be, over and over, in a rolling sequence of adjustments that Fist later said should have been computationally impossible in real time. It destroyed the first Vreth ship with a strike to the drive core at a range that Concordat weapons were not rated to achieve accurately. It disabled the second with 3 precise hits that Fist subsequently spent 4 hours trying to reverse engineer, because all 3 targeted the same structural junction from 3 different angles simultaneously at a platform moving at that velocity. The 2 Vreth ships targeting the damaged Concordat vessel stopped. They turned toward the Resolute instead. The Resolute turned toward them. What happened next was not something Ron could describe precisely in his report. It lasted less than 90 seconds. When it was over, the 2 Vreth ships were adrift, and the Resolute was pulling a slow arc back toward the defensive line, with miners scoring along its port hull. Breck's channel was silent for 11 seconds. Then, Resolute, report. Your status. Osai's voice, minor hull scoring, no casualties. We're returning to holding position. Another pause. You entered Vreth firing range at close distance. On purpose. Yes. Your hull rating does not support that. Our hull held, Osai said simply. The remaining 7 Vreth ships withdrew. Not in defeat, they were Consolidating. Solis' projection updated in real time, and Ron, watching from the observation deck, saw the larger force appear on the edge of the display, much larger than the Council had estimated. Many more ships than 9. Fis was very still beside him. Even her mandibles had stopped. Ron looked at the Resolute's hull through the transparent wall of the observation deck. There was scoring, yes, long dark streaks where Vreth weapons had touched it, but it was intact. He put one hand against the transparent surface, feeling the faint vibration of the ship systems beneath his palm, and thought about a crew that had flown deliberately into that fire because they had decided it was necessary. Not because they were not afraid. He had heard their voices. He knew fear when he heard it. They had been afraid. They had gone anyway, and none of them seemed surprised that they had. He did not have a word for that in Torathi. He was not sure there was one. The Concordat Council fractured along the lines councils always fracture. Along when the news is bad enough, some members called for a defensive perimeter and full withdrawal from the frontier. Some called for an immediate strike before the larger Vreth force could consolidate. Several smaller civilizations sent private signals toward the Vreth. Frequency bands, not transmissions anyone could officially acknowledge, but the kind of thing that happens when a species has calculated that survival is worth whatever it costs. The Vreth did not respond to any of them. They did not negotiate. They had never negotiated. That was in some ways the cleanest part of the problem. Breck wanted a frontal assault with the combined fleet at maximum capacity. It was not a plan without logic. The Vreth force had not fully consolidated. Yet, a fast strike might break the formation before it hardened. But the numbers did not work, and everyone who looked at them honestly knew it. Solis had put the Concordat's casualty projections into a clear visual format and transmitted them to the Council without commentary. Nobody had thanked her for it. Ron returned to the Resolute that evening without fully deciding to. He found himself at the ship's docking collar and then inside it, which was the diplomatic equivalent of admitting that the Council chamber had nothing left to offer him. Osai was in her office. She was not working. She was sitting at her desk, with her hands folded and her eyes on the wall, which was displaying nothing. She looked up when he knocked on the open door and waved him in. He sat. For a moment neither of them said anything. Outside the viewport, the stars held their positions with total indifference to what was happening among the small, warm things moving between them. "How are you not afraid?" Ron asked. He had not planned to ask it. She looked at him with something that might have been surprise, or might have been recognition. "I'm afraid," she said. "I've been afraid since before we left." He considered that. "You don't show it." "Showing it doesn't help anything right now." She paused. Then she leaned back in her chair and looked at the ceiling. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Do you know what Earth looked like 300 years ago?" He did not answer immediately. He had read some of it, not all. The Human Historical Archive was not pleasant reading, and many Concordat species had flagged large sections of it as psychologically disturbing content under standard xenocultural sensitivity protocols. "I know parts of it," he said. "We spent 10,000 years fighting each other," Osa said. Her voice was level, not proud, not ashamed, level, the way a doctor describes a diagnosis. Not small conflicts, wars that ended cities, wars that we designed to end as many of us as possible as fast as possible. We built weapons specifically to destroy everything. We came within hours of using them more than once. She brought her eyes back down from the ceiling and looked at him. Every dark thing the Vreth are we did it to each other for thousands of years. Ron did not say anything. He was thinking about the sections of the archive he had flagged as too disturbing to finish. "We didn't stop because we ran out of reasons to fight," she said. "We stopped slowly, badly, with enormous cost because we finally understood what it actually does, not just to the people who lose. To everyone." She was quiet for a moment. "We remember it, all of it. We keep records of every war we ever fought. We teach it to children. Not to scare them, so they understand the weight of it." "That sounds like a burden," Ron said. "It is," she said, "but it's also why we know what we're doing when we decide something is worth fighting for anyway." He sat with that for a long time. The stars outside continued their indifference, somewhere in the ship, deep in the engineering deck. He could faintly hear Peter moving around, doing the small, steady work of keeping systems ready. Ron returned to his quarters and did what he had not done before. He opened the full human historical archive, not the summary sections. The full record. He read for 6 hours. He did not stop because he ran out of material. He stopped because he needed to sit quietly and process what it meant. That a species capable of every horror in those records had also produced Osai and Solis, and Peter, who talked softly to a ship because he cared whether it was all right. At the second hour of morning, his communication panel signaled an incoming transmission, flagged high priority, personal encryption. The sender identification read, Elder Yova, Concordat High Council. Private channel not logged. He had not known the Elder ever initiated private contact with anyone. She was the oldest living member of the Concordat. She had watched civilizations enter the Alliance and watched some leave it in ways that were not called leaving. She did not, as far as Ron knew, make personal calls. The transmission was not addressed to him. It was addressed to Osai. He did not know what was said. The channel was private and Os did not tell him, but the next morning when he passed her in the corridor, something in her face was slightly different, not softer, steadier, as if she had set something down that she had been carrying for a long time, or as if someone had told her that the weight she was carrying was real and necessary and seen. She called the crew together at midday, all 7 of them in the mess. She told them what Solis' projections showed. She told them what the Concordat fleet could and could not do. She told them what she believed the next engagement would look like. Nobody flinched. Solis was already pulling up numbers on her tablet. Before Osai had finished speaking, Peter nodded slowly, the way a man nods when he has already decided and only needed to hear the words made. Official. The others looked at each other the way people look at each other when they have already had the private version of this conversation in their own heads and arrived at the same answer. Ron stood in the doorway watching. He had not been invited, but Os had not told him to leave either. He thought about 10,000 years of records. He thought about people who carried the full weight of what their species had been and had decided to be something else, not by forgetting but by remembering so completely that the choice became clear. He thought that he had badly misjudged what one ship could mean. Solis was wrong about one thing, not the size of the Vreth force. Her numbers on that were exact to within 2 vessels. She was wrong about the timing. The consolidation completed 6 hours ahead of her projection, which meant the Concordat fleet was still arranging itself into a defensive posture when the Vreth moved. 41 vessels, moving in the same pack spread formation but scaled. A pattern that the smaller 9-ship advance force had been a rehearsal for. The Concordat's combined fleet numbered 33 warships. On paper that was close enough to fight. In the reality of the pack spread formation, it was not close at all. Breck opened a channel to the Resolute. His voice had changed. There was no laughter in it, There was no contempt, there was just a Gorvathi. War commander looking at numbers, he did not like and doing the thing that military professionals eventually do when pride stops being useful. Resolute, he said. The pack spread formation has a command cluster, a central coordination mass. If it is disrupted, the pack hunt instinct degrades into individual action. Their tactics collapse. We know, Osai said. The cluster is inside the formation. To reach it, a vessel would need to pass through the outer ring. A pause. No Gorvathi ship in this fleet has the maneuverability profile to survive that transit. I know that too, Osai said. A longer pause, the kind of pause that costs something to produce. Can you reach it? Yes, she said. That was the whole conversation. Ron had been asked, politely but firmly, to move from the observation deck to an interior compartment for the engagement. He understood why. The observation deck was exposed viewport. Interior was armored hull. He went to the small room off the main corridor that the crew used for storage and personal items, and he sat on a crate and listened to the ship. He had not understood before how much a ship communicated through its structure. The Resolute spoke constantly, vibration, tone shifts in the drive systems, the particular sounds of a vessel under load. He could not read those sounds the way the crew read them, but he could feel the story they were telling. The ship was working, the ship was working very hard. Pieter's voice came through the internal comm, not directed at anyone in particular, just the ongoing conversation he maintained with the ship systems, as if they were a partner he was collaborating with. Good, yes, hold that. A little more, yes, there you are, good girl. Osai gave 2 orders in the first 4 minutes. Soli's outer ring. Entry vector. And then 2 minutes later, Pieter, I need everything. Pieter's response was not words. It was the sound of the drives changing pitch, rising to something Ron felt in his teeth. The Resolute entered the outer ring of the Vreth formation. What that meant, translated into physical reality, was this: the ship flew through concentrated fire from multiple Vreth vessels simultaneously, changing its position continuously in a sequence of movements that Fiss later described as occupying the negative space of the targeting solutions, moving not away from the fire, but into the gaps between where the fire would logically go next. It required the targeting calculations to be running ahead of the incoming weapons. Solis ran them, she ran them, while a console struck through her sideways into the wall, and she caught herself with one hand and kept working with the other. The hull took hits, real hits, not scoring. The ship cried out in the way. Metal under stress cries out, a sound that Ron felt more than heard. Pieter talked to it without stopping. It held. The command cluster was a mass of 7 Vreth ships moving in tight formation at the center of the pack spread. Removing any one of them would not be enough. The cluster's function was distributed, resilient. The coordination had to be broken, not reduced. Osai did not try to destroy the cluster. Solis had worked this out days earlier in the same session where she had first shown Ron the herding pattern. Destroying the cluster would take time and firepower the Resolute could not spend inside the formation while the outer ring was active. But disrupting it, driving a single vessel through the cluster at attack speed, targeting the relay nodes rather than the hulls, that was achievable. The Resolute drove through the command cluster at a speed that the Gorvathi tactical officers watching remotely would later say was not possible for a vessel of that class. It was possible. Pieter made it possible in the way that the people who understand machines at their deepest level can make things possible that the specifications say cannot be done. 8 relay nodes, 8 strikes, 31 seconds. The command cluster did not explode. It went silent. The tight formation dissolved into individual movement as each Vreth ship lost the shared coordination signal and fell back on base instinct, which was aggressive, but uncoordinated, without the pack spread's geometry, without shared targeting. 41 individually aggressive Vreth ships were still dangerous but no longer a system. Breck saw it immediately. He did not pause to express surprise. He drove the Concordat fleet forward. The Vreth broke in stages, not retreating, because retreat required a coordination they no longer had, but dispersing, each ship making its own decision, which meant they stopped reinforcing each other and started getting isolated by the Concordat advance. An isolated Vreth ship was still dangerous. A Concordat warship was more dangerous. One by one, the math resolved. The last Vreth vessel left the engagement at the 47th minute. The channel went quiet, 42 species over however many ships, sitting in the silence that follows something that went to the edge and came back. It is a specific silence. Anyone who has heard it knows it is different from other kinds. Ron made his way back to the observation deck. The stars outside were the same. The Resolute was damaged. He could see it now through the viewport, the places where the hull was wrong, scorched, dented inward in spots where something very large had pushed very hard. It was still flying. It was still whole. Breck's voice came across the open channel, just 2 words addressed to the Resolute. "How?" he said. And then, before Osai could answer, Ron heard something he had not expected. He heard Piotr still in the engine room, still talking to the ship. His voice was soft and warm and satisfied. "Good girl," he said. "Good girl, you did well." Ron stood at the viewport for a long time and did not try to explain to himself why that particular sound made his chest feel strange and full. The Concordat formal review session was held 14 days after the engagement in the great chamber of the flagship, with all 42 member species present or represented. It was the kind of session with a very specific purpose: to make official what had already been informally understood, and to say out loud what everyone had been thinking privately. Ron had been asked to give the primary observer's report. He had spent 8 of those 14 days writing it. He had written 4 full versions. He discarded all of them. He stood at the speaker's position in the center of the chamber and looked out at 42 species arranged in their tiers, from the towering Gorvathi in their reinforced seats to the SETI clustered in their observation cluster on the left, to Elder Yova at the highest position, 4 eyes in her ancient face looking down at him with something that might have been patience, or something much older than that. He did not open his prepared notes. He had decided on the walk to the chamber that the formal version was the wrong version. This required the real one. "I was sent to the Resolute as an observer," he said. "I expected to observe a military asset. What I observed was something for which I did not have a prepared category." He paused. "So I will describe what I actually saw, and let this council draw its own conclusions." He told them about the access card Osai had handed him on the first morning. He told them about the crew that was relaxed until the moment they were not, and the speed of that shift and what it meant about the relationship between a crew and its work. He told them about Piotr and the engine manifold, and Fiss's 11 queries that found no match in the Concordat archive. He told them about Solis showing him the herding pattern, the pattern the humans had seen before they had left their own system, which meant they had arrived already knowing what was coming and had not found that reason to send more ships. He told them about sitting in Osai's office in the dark and asking her how she was not afraid. He told them what she said. He told them about the historical archive and the 6 hours he had spent reading it, and what it felt like to read the full record of what a species had done to itself across 10,000 years, and then look up and see the same species flying a damaged ship through concentrated fire because someone had to, and they had decided they were the ones to do it. The chamber was very quiet. I have asked myself, Ron continued, why they sent one ship, not as a criticism, as a genuine question, and I believe I understand it now. He looked up at Elder Yova, then back at the broader assembly. They did not send one ship because they were arrogant. They sent one ship because their analysis of the situation told them one ship was sufficient, and sending more would have placed more lives in a situation that one ship could handle. That is not confidence born from ignorance. That is precision. That is a species that has spent a very long time learning the exact cost of every decision, because they have paid that cost before in their own history in ways they did not survive easily. He folded his hands in front of him. The Vreth are frightening because they are without limit. They do not stop. They do not negotiate. They consume without end. We have feared them because we could not imagine what could stand against something without limit. He looked at the human delegation, 3 people seated quietly near the back of the chamber, Osai among them, all of them still listening. We were looking for something without limit, he said. We were wrong. What stands against something without limit is not something equal to it. It is something that knows exactly what its limits are and chooses every time to go right to the edge of them anyway, because it has already counted the cost and decided the cost is worth it. He stepped back. The chamber stayed quiet. Then Breck stood. The Gorvathi admiral was not a person who spoke softly, but he was quiet now, the quiet of a person who has decided that what he is about to say is important enough to say carefully. In Gorvathi tradition, he said, our highest military title is not given for the size of the force commanded. Our histories are full of generals who moved great fleets. We do not honor them most. He turned toward the human delegation. The title is given for the smallest force used to achieve the necessary outcome, because that is the measurement of understanding, to know exactly what is needed and use only that and succeed. He was quiet for a moment, then he spoke one word in Gorvathi, a word his translator rendered imperfectly but adequately as the term for someone who has passed the test that only the worthy even know exists. He looked at Osai when he said it. Osai inclined her head slightly. She did not perform surprise because she was not surprised. She had not come here for recognition. She had come here because there was a job, and she was the one to do it. That was all it had ever been. Elder Yova closed the session. She had not spoken for the entire review. She spoke now briefly, the way very old people speak when they have learned that long speeches are usually shorter thoughts stretched out. The Concordat has grown by many means, she said. Trade, treaty, mutual defense, shared survival. This is the first time in my memory that a member has taught us what courage looks like by simply being itself in front of us. We are a larger thing for it. She looked at the human delegation. We are grateful. The Resolute sat in dry dock for 11 days. Pieter managed the repair teams the way he managed everything, with personal interest in every system, an unwillingness to accept work he did not believe in, and a continuous gentle commentary directed at the ship as if it could hear what was being done to make it well, and would appreciate being kept informed. Ron visited on the 9th day. He found Pieter in the engineering deck. 3 panels open, his hands inside the wall, humming something without a clear melody. The ship was quiet around them in the specific way of things that are resting. He found Osai outside, sitting in the corridor that ran along the ship's underbelly, watching through a maintenance port as the dry dock crews worked on the hull. She had a cup of something hot. She was not doing anything else, just watching the work. He sat beside her. They were quiet together for a comfortable amount of time. "What comes next?" he asked eventually. She looked at the work being done on her ship, the scored plating being cut away, the new sections going in precisely fitted. For the Vreth, the Concordat will need a coordinated long-term strategy. That will take time and probably a great deal of argument, a small, dry sound that was almost a laugh. "For us," she looked at the repair work. "Again, we'll be flight-ready in 2 days. Then we go where we're needed." He looked at her, and if that means another engagement like this one. She met his eyes. "Then we'll handle it." He believed her. That was the part he had not expected in the beginning. That belief would come so naturally and so completely, not because she had performed confidence, or shown him impressive things or said the right words, but because she had simply been exactly what she was, without pretense and without apology, in every moment he had watched her. He had come aboard the Resolute expecting to manage a diplomatic awkwardness. He was leaving it eventually, when his report was finished and his duties took him elsewhere, having seen something he had not seen in 200 years of watching civilizations move against each other. He had seen a species that had learned, the very hard way, what they were capable of at their worst, and had decided clearly, completely, with full knowledge of the cost, to be something else instead. They had sent one ship. One ship had been enough. It had always been enough. Because of what was inside it. Ron sat beside Ose in the quiet dry dock corridor and looked at the stars through the maintenance port and thought that he would have a great deal to write in his private journals, the ones he did not file with the Concordat archive, the ones where he put the things that were true but difficult to translate into official language. He thought the first line would be simple. He thought it would say, "I misunderstood the question. They were never asking for a fleet. They were asking for the right answer." And the right answer, it turned out, had already known what it was doing. From the moment it dropped out of faster-than-light travel and asked, with complete calm, for docking coordinates.